The winter of 1872 hit Scottsbluff, Nebraska territory with a vengeance unlike anything the settlers had seen in years, transforming the rugged landscape into a treacherous white abyss that threatened to swallow whole anyone foolish enough to venture out. It was against this merciless backdrop that Nora Adams stood at her cabin window, pressing her palm against the frosted glass as tears streamed down her face, her 4-year-old daughter Emma's labored breathing filling the small room behind her. Nora had lost her husband James to pneumonia just last winter, leaving her alone to manage their small homestead with a young child. She'd been doing her best, working herself to exhaustion each day, but now as Emma's fever climbed higher and her small chest rattled with each breath, Nora felt the crushing weight of her isolation. Scottsbluff was 15 miles away, the doctor even further, and the blizzard howling outside made travel seemingly impossible. "Mama," Emma's weak voice called from the bed, "it hurts to breathe." Nora rushed to her daughter's side, placing a cool cloth on her forehead. "I know, sweet girl. You just rest now." But as she tucked the quilts around Emma's trembling frame, Nora knew rest wouldn't be enough. Emma's skin burned like fire, her cheeks flushed crimson against her otherwise pallid face. This was more than a winter chill. This was the fever that had taken 3 children from the Morrison family last month. A sudden pounding at the door startled Nora from her worried thoughts. She hadn't been expecting anyone, especially not in this weather. Grabbing her husband's old shotgun from beside the door, she called out, "Who's there?" "Samuel Larson, madam, from the Triple L Ranch to the north. Saw your chimney smoking and wanted to make sure you had enough firewood to last the storm." Nora hesitated before unbolting the door. Samuel Larson was known in these parts as a capable rancher who'd arrived from Texas about 2 years ago. She'd seen him in town occasionally, trading cattle and supplies, but they'd never exchanged more than polite nods. When she opened the door, the tall cowboy stood with snow crusting his heavy coat and wide-brimmed hat, a bundle of firewood in his arms. His face, partially hidden behind a thick beard dusted with ice, showed immediate concern when he saw her tear-streaked face. "Mrs. Adams," he said, stepping inside as she moved aside. "What's wrong, my daughter?" Nora said, her voice breaking. "She's burning with fever. I've tried everything willow bark tea, cold compresses, nothing's helping. She needs a doctor, but in this storm." She gestured helplessly toward the window where snow was piling against the glass. Samuel set down the wood by the hearth and crossed to where Emma lay on the bed. He removed his gloves and gently placed the back of his hand against her forehead, frowning at the heat radiating from her skin. "How long has she been like this?" "The fever started yesterday, but it's gotten much worse since morning. She's having trouble breathing now." Samuel's face grew grave as he listened to Emma's labored breaths. "My sister lost her boy to something that sounded just like this. Dr. Wilder in town has medicine for it now." He straightened, determination settling in his features. "I'll go for him." Nora stared at him in disbelief. "Mr. Larson, you can't be serious. It's 15 miles to town in a blizzard. You'd never make it." "Call me Sam," he said, already pulling his gloves back on. "And I've ridden through worse. My horse Midnight is the strongest Mustang in the territory. If anyone can make the trip, we can." "I can't ask you to risk your life for us," Nora protested, even as hope flickered in her chest. Sam paused, his blue eyes locking with hers. "You didn't ask, Mrs. Adams, and I'm not just doing this for you. No child should suffer if there's a chance to help." He glanced back at Emma, whose small face was contorted in discomfort even in sleep. "I lost my wife and unborn child 5 years ago to fever because help didn't come in time. I won't stand by and watch it happen again." Before Nora could respond, Sam was checking his pistol and securing it in its holster. "Keep her as cool as you can. I'll be back with the doctor before dawn." "Sam," Nora called as he reached for the door. "Thank you." He nodded once, his expression softening momentarily before he stepped out into the howling storm, disappearing into the swirling white. Nora returned to Emma's bedside, praying that the cowboy's confidence wasn't misplaced. As the hours crawled by, she battled both Emma's rising fever and her own growing fear. The wind screamed around the cabin like a banshee, rattling the windows and sending drafts of cold air through every crack in the walls. "Please, James," she whispered to her late husband's memory, "watch over them both out there." Sam hunched low over Midnight's neck, letting the horse pick his way through the deepening snow. The temperature had dropped even further after nightfall, and the wind drove the snow into stinging needles that pierced any exposed skin. His face was numb despite the wool scarf wrapped around the lower half, and his fingers, though gloved, were growing clumsy with cold. "Just keep going, boy," he urged Midnight, the words lost in the howling wind. "Those two need us." The image of Nora Adams' face kept pushing him forward. He'd noticed her around town since he'd arrived in the area, a beautiful widow trying to make it on her own, too proud to accept help but clearly struggling. He'd admired her determination from afar, finding excuses to ride past her homestead occasionally, never working up the courage to do more than tip his hat if she happened to be outside. But seeing her today, fear for her child etched across her face, had awakened something fierce in him. He couldn't save his own wife, Caroline, when the fever took her, but maybe he could save Nora's child. The journey that should have taken 3 hours stretched into 5 as Midnight fought through snowdrifts that sometimes reached his chest. Twice, Sam dismounted to dig the horse out when he became stuck, his own body shivering uncontrollably as sweat from the exertion froze against his skin. When the scattered lights of Scottsbluff finally appeared through the driving snow, Sam nearly wept with relief. He urged Midnight toward the center of town, where Dr. Wilder kept his office and residence above the pharmacy. The streets were deserted, the town huddled against the storm. Sam pounded on the doctor's door, calling out until a light appeared in an upstairs window. Dr. Wilder, a man in his 60s with white hair and a perpetually concerned expression, peered down at him. "Who's there? What in God's name are you doing out in this?" "Sam Larson, Doc. It's the Adams girl out at Willow Creek. Fever's got her bad breathing trouble burning up." "Sounds like what took the Morrison children." The doctor's face grew serious. "Come in, quickly, I'll get my things." Inside, as Sam warmed his frozen hands by the stove, the doctor gathered medicines and instruments into his bag. "You're half frozen yourself," Wilder observed. "It's madness to go back out tonight." "No choice," Sam said firmly. "That little girl might not make it till morning." The doctor studied him for a moment, then nodded. "My horse is fresher. We'll take my sleigh, it'll be faster than riding through these drifts." Within 20 minutes, they were headed back into the storm, the doctor's sturdy draft horse pulling the sleigh while Midnight followed behind, tethered to the back. The sleigh moved faster than the horse alone had, cutting through the snow rather than plowing into it, but the wind had intensified, pushing against them like a living thing trying to force them back. "How well do you know the Adams woman?" The doctor shouted over the wind after they'd been traveling for some time. "Not well," Sam admitted. "Just as a neighbor." The doctor gave him a sideways look. "Must be some neighbor to risk freezing to death for her." Sam didn't respond, his thoughts returning to Nora's face, to the strength he'd seen there even as fear threatened to overwhelm her. He'd known plenty of strong women in his life, his mother, his sister, his late wife, but something about Nora Adams called to him in a way he couldn't explain and didn't try to understand. They were still 5 miles from the Adams homestead when disaster struck. A massive snowdrift, concealed by the darkness and swirling snow, caught the sleigh's runner, tipping it violently to one side. The doctor's horse panicked, lunging forward and snapping the harness. The sleigh overturned, throwing both men into the snow. Sam struggled to his feet, disoriented, to find the doctor lying motionless several feet away, the sleigh on its side between them. "Doc!" he shouted, fighting through the deep snow to reach him. The older man was conscious but grimacing in pain. "My leg. Wilder gasped as Sam knelt beside him. Broken, I think. Sam carefully examined the limb, feeling the unnatural angle beneath the doctor's heavy pants. You're right, we need to get you somewhere warm. The doctor grabbed his arm with surprising strength. No time, the child needs medicine now. He pointed to his medical bag, which had landed in the snow nearby. The small blue bottle its quinine for the fever, and the white powder packets mix with water for the lung inflammation. You need to get those to her. I can't leave you out here, Sam protested. There's a line shack belonging to the Carter spread about a half-mile east, the doctor said. Get me there, then go on to the Adams place. It took precious time to capture Midnight, who had broken free when the sleigh overturned, and to fashion a travois from the broken sleigh parts to transport the injured doctor. By the time Sam had the doctor settled in the abandoned line shack with a fire burning in the small stove, another hour had passed. Go, Dr. Wilder insisted, handing Sam the medicines with instructions. I'll be fine until you can send help. With the medical bag secured to his saddle, Sam set out once more into the storm. The temperature had dropped even further, and ice had formed in his beard and eyebrows. His exhausted body screamed for rest, but the thought of Nora waiting, of little Emma struggling to breathe, drove him forward. Midnight, sensing his rider's urgency, pushed on valiantly, steam rising from his heaving flanks as he plowed through the snow. The last 3 miles seemed endless, landmarks obscured by the white blanket that covered everything. When the outline of the Adams cabin finally appeared through the swirling snow, a single light glowing in the window like a beacon, Sam nearly sobbed with relief. He dismounted, his legs so numb he nearly collapsed, and staggered to the door. Nora flung it open at his first knock, hope and despair warring on her face. Sam, thank God! Her expression fell as she realized he was alone. The doctor, accident with the sleigh, Sam explained, stumbling inside and pulling the medical bag from his shoulder. Broke his leg. But I have the medicine. He fumbled with frozen fingers to open the bag. How is she? Worse, Nora whispered, leading him to the bed where Emma lay. The child's breathing had become a series of shallow gasps, her small chest heaving with each labored breath. Her face was flushed scarlet against the white pillowcase. Sam quickly explained the doctor's instructions as he measured out the quinine. Together, they managed to get the bitter medicine into the semi-conscious child, followed by the white powder mixed with water. Sam then showed Nora how to create a steam tent using a pot of boiling water and a blanket draped over Emma, as the doctor had instructed. Now we wait, Sam said, finally allowing himself to sink into a chair by the fire. His clothes were soaked through with melted snow and sweat, his body trembling with cold and exhaustion. Nora brought him a blanket, wrapping it around his shoulders. You need to get out of those wet clothes before you catch your death, she said, her voice gentle but firm. I have some of James' things that might fit you. Too exhausted to argue, Sam accepted the dry clothes and changed behind a screen in the corner while Nora tended to Emma. The borrowed shirt was tight across his shoulders, but the dry fabric was a blessing against his chilled skin. When he emerged, Nora was sitting beside Emma, stroking her hair and singing softly. She looked up as he approached. Her breathing seems a little easier already, she said with cautious hope. Sam placed his hand on Emma's forehead. The fever still raged, but the child's desperate gasping had indeed eased somewhat. The medicine works quickly on the breathing, he explained, repeating what the doctor had told him. The fever will take longer to break. Throughout the long night, they took turns watching over Emma, applying cool compresses to her burning skin and administering more medicine as the doctor had instructed. The storm continued to rage outside, but inside the cabin, a different kind of vigil was taking place. 2 virtual strangers united in their determination to save one small life. As dawn approached, Emma's fever finally broke. She fell into a peaceful sleep for the first time in days, her breathing deep and regular. Nora wept with relief, collapsing against Sam's chest as he stood beside her. "You saved her," she whispered, her tears soaking into his borrowed shirt. "You risked your life in that blizzard for a child you didn't even know." Sam's arms came around her hesitantly, then more firmly as she leaned into him. "I could not try," he said simply. "Not when I knew what was at stake." Nora pulled back slightly to look up at him, really seeing him perhaps for the first time. His face was haggard with exhaustion, his dark beard still damp from the melted ice, but his blue eyes held a warmth that reached something long dormant inside her. "Thank you seems inadequate," she said. Seeing her breathing easier is thanks enough. The blizzard finally broke later that morning, allowing Sam to ride to the nearest neighboring ranch to send help for Dr. Wilder. The doctor was rescued from the line shack and taken back to town, where his broken leg was properly set. In the days that followed, as Emma recovered her strength, Sam found himself riding over to the Adams homestead daily. At first he made excuses bringing supplies, checking on Emma's recovery, helping with chores Nora had neglected during her daughter's illness. But soon the pretense fell away. He came because he wanted to see them, to see Nora's smile when he arrived, to hear Emma's delighted call of Mr. Sam. As she ran to greet him, to feel the sense of rightness that settled over him in their presence. Spring came early that year, the harsh winter giving way to a landscape bursting with new life. Sam helped Nora prepare her fields for planting, working alongside her from dawn to dusk, their conversations flowing more easily with each passing day. It was during one such day, as they paused for water in the shade of a cottonwood tree, that Nora finally asked the question that had been on her mind for months. "Why did you really come that night, Sam, before you knew Emma was sick? You said you saw my chimney smoking, but every chimney for miles would have been smoking in that cold." Sam hesitated, then gave her the truth. "I'd been finding excuses to ride past your place since I first saw you in town last spring. That day, I finally worked up the courage to actually stop." He shrugged, embarrassed. "I was going to offer to chop wood or some such nonsense just to talk to you." Nora's eyes widened. All that time," he confirmed. "You looked so capable, so determined to make it on your own. I admired that. But I also saw how hard you were working, how alone you were out here." He looked away, across the fields they'd just plowed together. "I know what alone feels like." Nora's hand covered his where it rested on his knee. "Neither of us is alone anymore, are we?" As spring turned to summer, their relationship deepened. Sam continued to run his ranch, but he spent every spare moment with Nora and Emma. He taught Emma to ride a gentle pony he brought for her, and in the evenings, he would sit on the porch with Nora, watching the sunset and talking about everything and nothing. It was on such an evening, with Emma already asleep inside, that Sam finally spoke of his wife. "Caroline was 8 months along when the fever took her," he said quietly. "I was out on a cattle drive. By the time I got back, they were both gone." Nora's hand found his in the gathering darkness. "Is that why you rode through the blizzard for us? Because you couldn't save them?" Sam considered this. "Partly," he admitted. "But mostly because from the moment I saw you standing in that doorway, tears on your face and a shotgun in your hands, something in me knew I'd ride through worse than a blizzard if you needed me to." Nora turned to face him, her eyes reflecting the last light of the setting sun. "I've been afraid to feel anything since James died," she confessed. "It hurt too much to lose him. I told myself Emma was enough, that I didn't need anyone else." "And now?" Sam asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Now I know that's not true." She moved closer, her hand coming up to rest against his cheek. "I need you, Sam Larson. Emma needs you. We both do." Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, both of them rusty in the language of romance. But the second was surer, deeper, filled with the promise of all they could be together. They married in the small church in Scottsbluff as summer gave way to autumn. Emma serving as flower girl, her face beaming with joy as she watched her mother and the man she'd already begun calling Papa exchange vows. Dr. Wilder, his leg healed but with a permanent limp from that fateful night, stood as Sam's best man. "I knew that night in the blizzard you weren't riding for just any neighbor," he said with a knowing smile during the celebration afterward. Life on the frontier was never easy, but together they built something beautiful. Sam moved his cattle operation to Nora's land, expanding it to include the adjacent unclaimed parcel. They added rooms to the cabin as their family grew, first with the birth of their son James Samuel the following year, and then twins, Sarah and Michael, 2 years after that. The winter blizzards still came, harsh and unforgiving as ever, but they faced them together. On the anniversary of that first terrible storm, when the wind howled around their now expanded home, Sam and Nora would tell their children the story of how a desperate ride through a blizzard had brought their family together. "Your papa is the bravest man I know," Nora would say, looking at Sam with eyes still full of love and gratitude after all their years together. "I just did what needed doing," Sam would always reply with characteristic modesty. But privately to Nora alone, he would add, "Best ride I ever took, even if I nearly froze to death. It led me home to you." As they grew older together, watching their children grow and eventually start families of their own, Nora and Sam remained at the heart of it all, their love a testament to that night when a stranger had appeared at her door, willing to brave impossible odds for a woman and child he barely knew. On their 25th anniversary, with their homestead now grown into one of the most prosperous ranches in the Nebraska Territory, Sam gave Nora a small wooden box he'd carved himself. Inside was a silver locket containing a tiny sketch of Emma as she'd been that night, small and fragile in her sickbed. "To remember where we started," he said, as Nora's eyes filled with tears, "and how precious what we've built together truly is." "I've never forgotten," Nora replied, closing her hand around the locket. "Not for a single day." Their love story became legend in Scottsbluff, passed down through generations, the tale of a cowboy who rode through a killer blizzard to save a child's life, and in doing so, found a love worth any risk, any sacrifice, any storm. And when newcomers would arrive in the growing town and hear the story, they would often ask if such a ride was really possible, if anyone could actually survive such conditions. The old-timers would just smile and point toward the Larson ranch, where even in their twilight years, Sam and Nora could often be seen sitting together on their porch, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist, still so visibly in love that it answered the question without words. Love, they had learned over their many years together, was not just the passion of youth or the comfort of middle age. It was the courage to ride through a storm when someone needed you, the strength to build a life from the ruins of loss, the wisdom to recognize that some journeys, however dangerous, were always worth taking. For Sam and Nora Larson, what had begun in desperation during the worst blizzard in memory had blossomed into a love that warmed them through all of life's seasons, a flame that neither time nor trouble could extinguish. And when asked, as they sometimes were by their grandchildren, if they would change anything about their story, they would look at each other, hands clasped together as they had been since that first night by Emma's sickbed, and answer with a single voice, "Not a single moment." For the ride through the blizzard had been just the beginning of their journey together, a journey that proved, day after day and year after year, that love was not just about grand gestures in desperate moments, but about the thousand small choices to keep riding through whatever storms life brought, always finding their way back to each other, always coming home.